Okay, so if you're good, I think that we left off at the last episode with the discussion on the Three Kings.
Yeah, that was a good one. Okay. So we came to the conclusion that, which king was the worst of the three, as far as the Germans were concerned.
Well, okay. Let me then share this question, and then we can continue the discussion. Okay, we have our three main guys here, which are as you said, the Three Kings, which is very nice. Actually, I like it very much.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with that. That actually really captures the whole thing in one nice statement there. So I think we've made a statement here. Three Kings.
But in terms of the game, it might be the Germans and Three Kings.
Yeah, well, it'll be Axis and Three Kings or whatever. But yeah, these are the three guys that really kind of set the table for what goes on inside of the country.
Yes.
And then there's of course foreign influences, which the Germans would be the primary one, but you're also going to have a little bit of the Western allies and a little bit of Russia, but way later in the war, not 41, 42 per se, not so much.
Not so much, yes. Well, obviously you're going to have the Italians, but again, not so much. The Germans are way, way more important.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Well, so to recap, so we have from left to right, we have Dragoljub Mihailović, which would be he would be a army colonel. He would be a Serb, and he would be leading the reorganized Yugoslav army, which is essentially mostly Serbs. In the center, you have Josip Broz, better known as Tito, which leads the communist partisans and who is basically an ethnic Croat or Croat Slovene.
Yeah.
Whatever. And his troops are mostly Serbs initially. And
they
even
switch,
later,
though, as the war goes on, right? Because I think it becomes a little more balanced as the war goes on, right?
Yeah, a little more, but still, we will discuss where his main strength comes from. Those would be.
This is a big deal for anybody that's following us. So this is going to be a real important discussion when we get to that. The composition of Tito's forces.
Yes. So in terms of ethnicity mixing, his force is the most ethnically mixed, but not as much as you would imagine. Let me just phrase it like that.
Okay. All right. That's a good way to put it. I'm curious to see what that breaks out. All right. And the last guy?
And the last guy is called Ante Pavelic, the leader of the Croat independent state of Croatia, which is an Axis puppet state. And he obviously leads the Croatian and Bosniak, actually, Ustaše, which would be the fire. Yeah.
There was a Bosniak Ustaše? Yeah, I would assume. Oh, of course there should be. I just never read too much about it, but there should be, Okay.
Well, for Bosniaks, yes, of course there were Ustaše, but Bosniaks would be a little more focused into various Bosniak legions working for the Germans and actually the SS. I guess a little bit more than Ustaše themselves, but actually I'm wrong there. The best Ustaše unit was made up mostly of Bosniaks.
Really?
Yes, the most.
That'll be an interesting conversation when we get there. Yeah.
We'll get there. Okay. We'll get there. The most. How could I describe it? The most combat competent unit of the Ustaše.
Well, most capable unit. Okay.
Yeah, that would be basically Bosniaks from.
It's funny you should mention it that way, because one of the biggest issues you have with this fight, and it came out in your design, was that most of these groups aren't really very good for fighting at all. In fact, they're pretty lousy. So you kind of want to lean into the groups that you have that can fight, because there's not a ton of them at this point in the war.
Yes. I mean, we have to be honest when we look at these things. This is not, those units in Yugoslavia are not Eastern Front quality.
I'm not even sure. I guess they'd probably work on the Western Front for a while, but yeah, they're really second tier garrison backline units. They're not combat effective at all for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, okay, the guerrillas are, they're brave, but they lack officers. They lack heavy equipment. They mostly lack training. This is a little bit worse with the communist partisans, and that will be later compensated by the British. And but still, they are not the I don't know, the units that you would be imagining, like special forces or something like that.
You don't really want these guys in regular combat, because they probably wouldn't last. I don't even know if they'd make it a week on the Russian front. They probably wouldn't. They'd probably disappear their first serious fight in the Russian front.
Well, as the Croat Legion found out, yes.
Yes, I bet there's a whole story behind that crew, isn't there?
It's a long and convoluted story, and they came back as partisans. Oh, I mean, not the partisans, but the Yugoslav Communist Army.
Oh, so here's an interesting tidbit, since we're kind of on this subject of unit qualities. So I'm assuming that the Spanish Civil War vets are kind of eagerly sought out to buff your units up, right?
Yes. It's just, the thing is that there are about 500 of them, so several hundred.
That's it?
And there is a
I thought
big
there was
deal.
More.
Yeah, there's a big deal told about them. Because they were supposed to be, this Superman that gave the partisans an edge, and they gave partisans an edge in terms of a civil war. When they need to fight the Chetniks, then the Spanish War veterans are really good because they're very eager to fight. But in terms of fighting the Germans, you also have some
like World War I vets, don't you? Don't you have some World War I vets in the officer ranks of the Serbians, though?
Yes.
Yes, they would actually be more effective. Of these troops, they would probably have the more effective troops that aren't Germans.
Actually, when we're talking about this, my personal take on this is that, but please take it with a grain of salt. It's not.
Oh no, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, but Chetniks beat Germans, Germans beat partisans, partisans beat Chetniks. Okay.
Oh.
Okay, when I say beat, when the Chetniks beat Germans, it's not that they actually can beat Germans, although that sometimes did happen. It's just like they have an edge.
Yeah, well, basically what it is the German troops are like police force in second tier, whereas the Serbians are probably upper edge second tier, so they're like slightly better militarily, but they don't really have the heavy equipment like a regular army would have. So they don't have all the artillery pieces, they don't have the tanks, they don't have the armored vehicles, they don't have any of that stuff. Not much of it anyway.
But they're very, very keen to fight the Germans because they're an army. They're army officers, they're an army, they're army soldiers. The partisans, however, are Civil War veterans from Spain, and they're mostly a political force more than soldiers. They tend to recruit younger people, so they're a little bit more keen on the Civil War side, and they're not very good against the Germans. Quite the contrary.
Oh, interesting. See, so well, I wish I knew what games you play, because from a game perspective, this is kind of easily understandable. So, like, the partisans would be better at like political control of an area, whereas the Serbians would be better at military control over the areas. These two are kind of fighting different agendas, because the partisans are all about political control, where the Chetniks are trying to keep these guys down and kind of keep the Germans at check as well as best they can. Oh, interesting. Okay, go ahead.
Well, okay, let's get back to our three guys. Yep. So I guess that when we talk about them, we have the common answer. So the answer would be that the Chetniks and Mihailovic are so and so because Mihailovic originally fought the Germans, but then he collaborated in this or other way. Of course, the communist story says one thing, the more realist story says another. But basically, it's so-so. Tito is obviously the German main enemy, and well, Pavelic, okay, he's their main asset, but there's some friction in that point also. But he still is an ally of them. Theirs.
He's almost as bad as like the Germans getting tagged up with the Austro-Hungarians during World War I. It's almost that kind of relationship. It's like, yeah, we support you, but I'm not really sure we should be supporting you because you're bringing a lot of grief to our table here.
No, actually, there's a story behind Pavelic and the Germans. So,
okay.
As we discussed earlier, when he launched those massacres, either him or his people, there are different theories on how that happened, or either Ustasha did this uncontrollably without his nod, but the other is he gave the go ahead, and whatever it is, it doesn't matter really.
So real quick question for you before we move off this point. So as far as like the hotbed that Yugoslavia becomes, this is kind of like the first thing that really kind of completely destabilized the post-invasion atmosphere, right? Because I think Germans came in, beat the Yugoslavian army, and the Germans were imposing a garrison force, and things were kind of mellow-ish at the moment.
Yes.
And I think, it's never going to last because you basically destabilize what little stability they had. And then, how do you say, is it Pavelic or Pavelic, right? That's how you say it.
Pavelic.
Pavelic came in and just completely uncorked all the unrest by pretty much doing a resettling, we shall say, of his Serbian countrymen, although I don't know if you really called it a country at that point or not. I'm not sure how to define it.
The official formula was kill a third, expel a third, and convert a third to Catholicism. So there's a big Catholic angle there.
I remember that quote, and I was like, man, that's pretty brutal. So you basically wind up with like a third of the people that are supporting you when you're done, and you expect the other 2/3 to just go away and not do anything. Yeah, right.
Well, that's
not going to work.
Well, that's the formula that I have found in numerous places. It's probably a formula set by one of their more loquacious guys who is a little bit, how should I say, unhinged part. But then again, it pretty much accurately conveys what they were actually trying to do. So you're completely correct, because at the point that the Germans conquered Yugoslavia, I guess that they realized at some point that the Serbs would rebel. At some point. And almost immediately, when they conquered Yugoslavia, they managed to haul a lot of Yugoslav soldiers in POV camps. And, yes, and of course they released Croats, Bosniaks, Macedonians, and they kept basically the Serbs and Slovenes.
They kept them in the camps.
Yes. So the point being is that Mihailovic and a lot of other soldiers managed to escape being imprisoned, because you've seen Yugoslavia, how it looks like. If you want to hide, you're going to hide.
You would have no trouble generally. Yeah, you go towards Bosniak territory, you can hang out the rest of your life if you want.
Yeah, so Mihailovic hid there from the communists for a full year. From all their, nobody could catch him for a full year. So basically, what happens is that Mihailovic, at that point, when Yugoslavia was crumbling, he basically reorganized the army into Chetnik formations. So this was the plan before the war. Obviously, it was not smooth going. It could have been done a lot more efficiently, but the army was not fully prepared. The Yugoslav army actually had some Chetnik battalions, which are very similar in idea and use to your Green Berets. So it's not the idea that these people would be fighting the Germans head on. The idea is that these people would be organizing guerrilla forces behind the German lines in order for an uprising to start. So
that actually makes sense, because they'd never be able to face the entire German army by itself. But at the point that started, the Germans were deep into Barbarossa, so they weren't really putting frontline troops in Yugoslavia anyways later on.
Yes.
Oh,
So the Germans actually did have an enemy right from the get-go, and they realized that they would be having problems with Serbs. So they left 4 divisions. Basically, 3 of those divisions were in Serbia, inner Serbia, Moravian Serbia proper.
Oh,
And
yeah.
one of those divisions was in today's Republika Srpska, part of Bosnia.
Right. So that would have been probably well, so I'm assuming it's in Serbia, so like the southeast corner of Serbia, because that part gets kind of mountainous around there, I think.
Southeast would be already Bulgarian territory.
Oh, okay. So
help.
what city was this last division located around? You know,
that last division was in Banja Luka, but
Banja
this is
Luka.
not.
Okay.
This is not Serbia, inner Serbia. This is
Right.
Republika Srpska. This is in Bosnia today.
Yeah.
So, but obviously
Right.
Serbs live there, so you want to keep that territory pacified, and also you keep 3 divisions. One is in Belgrade,
Uh-oh.
one is in Niš, and one is in, I believe, in Kraljevo or Kragujevac. Their HQs. Anyways, so the point being is, like you said, Pavelic basically lit the powder keg, and everything exploded upon his actions.
Yeah,
either his or his people's, doesn't really matter. And ultimately, there was a friction between German soldiers, local soldiers, and the political leadership.
Which, the Yugoslavian political leadership?
No. The German political leadership. The German political. So you have this personified in 2 persons. One is called Kashe, and the other is called von Horstenau. And the von Horstenau is a general, and his idea is we should get rid of Pavelic and install Macek.
That's where that came from.
Yeah. And Kashe,
I thought they made the pitch to him. I thought they made the pitch to him first to take leadership.
I don't believe so. I don't actually believe so. I don't think they did that, because obviously Macek is not their own political guy. Pavelic is. And I believe that would probably be too hot for Macek also, because
Macek is more like if Croatia was kind of allowed to stand by itself and they weren't really stirring the pot, he probably would have been the political leader of Croatia, right?
Yes. When there were elections, he was the political leader. But please bear also in mind, he's not the political leader of all the Croats only. He's also a political leader of some Serbs, because yes. So you have basically in old Yugoslavia, you have the ruling coalition, which is mostly Serbs, Bosniaks, and Slovenes. And also the opposition, which is Macek's Croats, or the Macek's peasant or farmers party, Croat farmers party, and the Serb Democratic Party, which, this is also the Macek is leader of the United Opposition. So it's at that point, the division between the Serbs and the Croats was not that, how should I say, it was not that stark. Okay.
No, not initially. No.
Yeah. So, but when Pavelic came in, that division obviously became much more pronounced, and due to obvious reasons.
My gosh. Yeah.
So on one side, Pavelic did the Germans a disservice because he lit the powder keg. But on the other hand, he did them a service, because that means that, the Serbs and Croats can't really unite, and the Croats are now firmly in the Axis camp. They didn't get a vote on that, obviously, but and it's unclear how many Croats actually supported Pavelic. But
I don't really know. There's not really any way to figure it out now either, because a lot of people would kind of deny any connection they had at all. So you just kind of have to make a wild guess as to what you think it would be. I have no idea. Exactly. But it's kind of like that. It's kind of like the, post World War II Germans. A lot of Germans probably like, oh, I don't know who those guys are. I didn't have anything to do with them.
I'm an Austrian. I'm from Austria. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. I'm Polish. I had nothing to do with that. Okay.
Oh yeah, sure. Anyways, but Actually, so we don't. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, a lot of them did go with Pavelic. There is a problem because Macek did support the new regime. Yeah, he gave support to the new regime, so that's kind of a legitimacy from that point.
So did he get kicked out, or did he voluntarily exile himself?
He remained in Serbia, in Yugoslavia, I mean, or Croatia, and he actually got Macek later even got arrested by the new regime, but by that time, the damage was done.
Yeah.
So this is one of unclear points. You can never tell. During Yugoslavia, the story was there were only a few Ustaše, and they made all of this trouble.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You can lean into that if you want. I don't believe it.
Yeah. On the other hand, we have the numbers. So when I mean, we cannot compare the number of Croats that were with Pavelic and the state as opposed to Tito, because simply there's a minuscule number compared, with Tito compared to the official state. And there's actually probably the numbers, the numbers that could be comparable are like numbers of Ustaše members and numbers of Croats with the partisans. But I think that the number of Ustaše would be even greater until 44, 45.
That's a good metric, actually. Well, at some point, as the war goes on, these guys start defecting, because part of this not having really, as the war goes on, well, because you don't have a really well-defined military structure at this point, and it's all kind of a political one. As the war goes on, the guys start switching to the sides that they think are going to win. And it was pretty obvious at some point that, Mikhailovich and Pavlovic aren't really a winning team. I got to line up with Tito if I want to survive after the war, and I want to be part of the post-war power structure. I got to shift sides.
Oh, exactly. So, but there was an interesting situation in late 1943 when a lot of Croats and Bosniaks started jumping ship from Pavelic to Tito, but then they realized, because Tito was supported by the Western Allies. But then they realized that the Western Allies are not actually coming, and the Germans are still remaining, and the winter is coming. So they decided, listen, we'll just go back, for the winter, and then we'll switch sides later. So, there's a
question for you, and this is a little further out. When was the Andreja River crossing? Was that before the winter of 43, or was that during the winter of 43? Because there's a big... When is that?
That's March 1943.
Oh, so it's right towards the end of winter, because that seemed to be the point where everything kind of shifts. Because I think Tito was really kind of, we're really jumping ahead of ourselves. Let's save that for another conversation.
Jumping ahead.
To me, that seems like kind of the pivotal point where everything shifts. But we'll go back to what we're talking about. We'll save that for later. All right, go ahead.
Anyways, so this would be the standard answer. Tito is the main enemy. Pavelic is, he isn't the main asset, and Mikhailovich is so. He was first the enemy, then later he collaborated or whatever, and that's the standard story. I have my take on this, and we'll discuss it. Obviously, I prepared some quotes from the Germans. Okay, because quotes from the Western Allies, actually, none of the English quotes are, for me, usable. I think they're kind of ridiculous.
My impression of what the English are, they didn't really understand what was going on at all, as far as I could tell.
Well,
they were doing cool things by sending supplies and dropping in special forces guys and doing stuff, but it's like, you guys are kind of supporting the communists. I don't know if that's really what you want to be doing here. I mean, I realize it's a battlefield expediency method, but you got to think about the post-war thing. It's like, do you really want a communist regime here? Okay, you could do that. It's a thing, sure.
Well, it's we will talk about the British in depth, okay?
Because, that's way later.
Yeah, well, because I have a obviously they really need to be taken apart, very slowly, because of all the things they did, because they were very active from the get-go, and just a short preview. You know how they say that the English fight their wars until the last ally.
Yeah.
There you go. Hey, anyways, yeah. So I have my own vision of the answer for this. Of course, if you want to go ahead and give your own take. If you don't, I can go ahead.
I will set that for later. I have to give that a thought, because I do have an opinion. I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but I'll tell you, I kind of backed into them because the first couple things I read about Yugoslavia was the British writings. And at the time, when I read them, it's like, oh, this is what was really going on. Oh, very cool. And that's all I had at first. And then as I started reading other things, it's like, oh, I'm not sure that was the correct perspective to have. I don't know if the British were all that I thought they were. Yeah, let me give it. I'll give you a quote on that next session, because I got to think about that a bit to kind of say something that I feel is appropriate about that topic.
Okay, then in that case, I'll go ahead and give my own highly, highly controversial answers for this.
Okay. All right.
Actually, I'm loving this because we'll be discussing this, further, and
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh yeah. So let me start off with Mihailovic. I'm gonna say he was their main enemy, and I believe that I gave you some quotes to this effect earlier. And we're going to go through them because they would be German quotes. So nothing from the British, nothing from the Americans, because obviously nothing from the communists, because Americans pretty much Americans were okay in the revisionist phase, like going on from the 60s or 70s. They gave some contributions, they have some documents, but not really. The English supported Tito, so what are they gonna say? We were scumbags. It's not gonna happen. So and the Germans were, were locally here. They had dealings with everybody. They had obviously a greatest interest to know what was happening exactly, and they know who they're fighting against. So any kind of, and obviously, and the third most important thing is that these are German internal quotes. So meant for their internal communication and not for propaganda or things like that. That's why actually I think that the German reports tend to be most reliable. But then again, obviously, you can't go 100% with them either.
No, but they're actually of all these powers, they're the ones that's like mostly intertwined with what's going on the ground. So they're going to have a lot of reports just coming, from combat reports and stuff. So they're going to have a lot better feel for what's going on than, say, the English, who had maybe 20 people on the ground or something. They didn't have very many, but they just had their agents running around as opposed to like real English battle troops in the battle. They weren't really fighting the battle. They were just providing guidance to the people that were fighting the battle, which weren't the English.
Yes.
Well, that was a torturous sentence.
Yeah, at the latest stage in the war in 1944, the English were very engaged. They provided huge help to Tito. So they were engaged in fighting, and that's the point when Tito's army was really becoming serious. But let's go. I'm going to go to Pavelic now. For Pavelic, I'm going with so-so, because on one hand, he did caused the whole powder keg to explode.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he made the cooperation between the Serbs and the Croats mostly impossible.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, you're right.
And the Croats are now in Axis camp because they're basically, what is the appropriate term?
Sort of allies, but yeah, there's another term you're looking for. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I get your point. They're allies, but they're more like co-conspirators as opposed to allies, I guess.
Yes. So the Croats don't know what the Serbs will do to them if the Serbs win. If the Serbs will be doing exactly the things that were done to them.
Well, they might.
Exactly. You never know. So at that point, the Croats are basically it's impossible for the Croats and Serbs to cooperate now. And obviously the Serbs have a terrible opinion of the Croats.
That's a really good point, Andrea. That's actually huge what you just said right there. So you go from a point where they might have cooperated to by the time 42 rolls around, there's like no chance of cooperation at all. You're not settling this issue. They're basically enemies at that point forward. And does that still carry on today? They still have hatred towards each other? Or has it kind of calmed down a bit?
Well, it has calmed down. It's not something that is, burning, but the countries are not really friendly when you look at it, bottom line.
Yeah, they've got like 50 years of really going after each other. So yeah, it takes a while to recover from that because you've got the World War II stuff and then whatever happened post-war, because I'm sure a lot of these things continued onward a bit. And then, of course, the 90s battles where they were fighting each other again.
Actually, there's World War I also.
Oh, yeah, World War I. Yeah, that's right.
So that's a whole other story also. But anyways, that's the whole thing, because now you have somebody that is in your boat because they are worried that they cannot escape. So that's the bonus that Pavelic brings into the Germans.
Okay, so let me ask you another question since we're on this topic. I don't know if we're going to be able to go a whole lot longer, but I'd like to cover this. So what do you think the overlap was between the Croats and the Italians? Were they supportive of each other in any degree? Were they enemies? Because they were kind of fighting over the same territory, really. Okay, so did they get along better than the Croats and the Germans, or really they were more the German camp?
Listen, the Croats and the Germans are a match made in heaven.
Ah.
Okay. So.
Okay.
Short answer. The short
answer. That's actually kind of funny because the Italians kind of put him in power, and then the Germans kind of took him away from the Italians, sort of.
Well, yes, but that's how power politics obviously works. That's why we're talking about Game of Thrones.
Oh my gosh.
At the point where Ustaše are somebody who is a terrorist organization that is working to undermine Yugoslavia, they are great to the Italians. At the point when the Ustaše, but the point when Ustaše are a government of Croatia, then they and the Italians are starting to butt heads because the Italians want Dalmatia.
Oh yeah, the Croats can't give that up because that basically butchers your country if you give that up.
Exactly. So Pavelic had to give it up. A lot of Dalmatia.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he had to give up a lot of Dalmatia. So one of the moves that the communists made was saying that, listen, we're even more Croatian patriotic than the Ustaše because we're going to take Dalmatia from the Italians.
You know what? You really just explained something I had a hard time with. The one thing I couldn't really reconcile was why there was a fight up there post-war. Like pretty much one of the last things that happened, I didn't do World War II at all, was a fight in Dalmatia. And I couldn't really understand what that was about, but you just explained it. We may have to wrap it up. Looks like chaos is about to erupt here, but
give me 5 minutes.
Yeah, take it, man. It's yours. Go.
The place that remains now is their main asset.
All right. Oh, you put this in. Oh, let me see what that is. Oh, that's pretty good. All right, thank you, Andrea. I couldn't see those words. I didn't realize you're filling that sheet out. Okay, that makes sense. Carry on.
So, of course, this is a highly controversial take, but I completely stand by it because people tend to look at the situation, what happened, and focus on why it happened, what was happening, and be too much caught up with it. Because there was an alternative possibility to the Germans, which was very scary. And alternative possibility is that all Serbs would rose up in revolt against the Germans.
Ooh, they sort of did that. That was like the first big thing. I guess we can talk about that our next time, but basically the first Serbian uprising, because that's when they made that republic. I forget the name of the republic.
Please, Serbs don't make
like
republics.
The first big thing that happened. What was it?
Serbs don't make republics.
So what was? Didn't they stand up something? Oh, so what was it that they did? Because they had something where it's like semi. Oh, so it was the communist revolt? Oh, well, this will be our topic for next time. All right.
Let me explain it this way. Britain is occupied by the Germans.
Okay.
And somebody starts a revolt against the Germans.
Right.
And proclaims a republic in Manchester.
Okay. Yeah.
How would the British react to this? Who had a monarchy for the last 1,000 or so years?
Oh, you're right. Okay, I forgot about that part of it. Okay.
So obviously, this is a huge poke in the eye to ordinary Serbs.
Oh, heck yeah.
So basically, what Tito did is basically divide the Serbs. And when you're looking as a German, from the German perspective, he has now divided the people that are fighting against you.
Yeah, which is perfect for the Germans. It's, in a weird way, he's kind of like their ally at this point, sort of.
So that's basically the crux of my take on this. We'll go in the next episode. We'll go into German. Let me just show it for a second.
Okay.
Some credentials from the Germans.
This is pretty good, Andrea. I like that. I hadn't realized that's in essence what happened. Is they basically split the Serbian resistance into two sides at that point. And once you do that, you pretty much nerf the Serbians as a big power block. Because at the moment they were the power block. Because they're like, you know, the biggest number of people. They had their hands on all the power levers. They had a military to fight with. And then, all right, sorry, you got something going on there.
Well, it's the credentials from the Germans.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to go into a bit more in-depth discussion on this in the next episode. But the point is that the Germans are saying who is their main enemy and who is their main trouble.
Oh.
And this changes, obviously, in the duration of the war.
Because you've laid it all out, and you can just kind of compare and contrast the messaging at each point of this. Okay, that'll be awesome, man. All right, looks like I'm going to have to let you go. Looks like all hell is broken loose here. Can you hear any of that?
I heard something. I remembered nothing.
Okay.
In any case, thanks a lot. We will be continuing our discussion next week. And